What does your crazy neighbor do to be labeled a crazy neighbor? My neighbor sits in his yard, hides behind his plants and meows at people who pass by. He is not dangerous at all, but he is not right in the head either. His caretakers are his parents and they seem to be very nice people. His dad once told me he just likes to be a cat and left it at that. I didn't ask any more questions. I would also like to be a cat, so I see no issue with this. It's all fun and games until he poops in the sandbox. She has a penchant for going around sticking nails in people's tires at night. This has happened dozens of times to nearly everyone on the street, though she's slowed down since more people started installing video cams and motion sensor lights in their driveways. Years ago we had a guy in our neighborhood like this. He stopped hitting our house when my crazy ass mother came flying out the house around 3 AM with her baseball bat. Fighting fire with fire. And by fire I mean crazy. And by fire I also mean crazy. We used to have someone that would do this in my old neighborhood. We still don't know who did it, but one night someone camped out and waited for him to do it again and pummeled him and left bleeding in the street. Cue ambulance and cop cars on the street at 3 AM on a Friday. Something similar happened to the teens that went around jiggling car handles in my old neighborhood. Guy figured out their route or something and baited his car on the street they seemed to hit a lot. He camped out in a bush and laid out the first one. The other two made a break for it, but the looting stopped after that. Her reasoning? If she's capable of it. We had one a while back that had a meth lab in the home. Crazy fights, yelling at all hours of the night. Dude would wander around the hood tweaked out crazy, and once he threw a Molotov cocktail out of the second floor window at another dude who was smashing up his car, screaming, "I'll freaking kill you, motherfricker." Those were interesting times. So, he tried to burn his own car to protect it. Probably didn't care about the car or it was too far gone and wanted to hit the guy. He eats my flowers. In his defense, he told us that he has been doing it for years when he introduced himself after we bought the house. He also brought over frozen cookies in a plastic bag as a housewarming gift, but wasn't sure what was in them. We share a side yard and as he was talking to us, I noticed his all brick house was actually roofing shingles, layered to look like brick. It started to register that he may be a little out there. He's a great neighbor. Just an older, eccentric stoner who keeps to himself and eats my flowers. No shame. Comes over to my yard and eats my lilies raw, or brings scissors and clips the heads to boil and make jam. It's crazy to me, but we have embraced it. I planted a couple raspberry, blackberry, and blueberry bushes 3 years ago, when we first moved in, on the side yard we share, as well as a few knockout rose bushes. I told him to help himself to berries roses anytime, especially before the birds do. The bushes have all gone insane and the entire side of my house is now a yearly buffet for my neighbor. Having a decent relationship with a crazy guy I share a property line with is worth some dead-headed flowers. Your neighbor might be part goat. You are a good neighbor, and a smart person who knows the difference between mostly harmless eccentricity and outright madness. If I owned a home, I don't, and knew I was slightly mad, I don't think I am, I'd want someone like you as a neighbor. Pulled us over pretending to be a police officer, saying that we had somehow broken the law, whilst pulling out of our driveway and that she was going to call it in. She isn't a cop, lol. Pretty sure that's a crime. Not only a crime, but a crime that really pisses off police officers. They'll arrest people on the spot for this kind of shoot. Impersonating a police officer, and not even in the female body inspector t-shirt kind of way. Someone in my part of town drives an old police Explorer, fully decked out, has booty patrol in big letters down both sides, and Unit D69 on the back. This reminded me of this crazy woman in my old neighborhood who used to pretend she was a cop all the time. First encountered her screaming at the post office staff because she'd arrived past the pickup time and they couldn't guarantee her letter would be in tomorrow. She was there almost an hour just pitching a fit while they opened the other counters around her. "Do you know who I am?" and all that stuff. Second time I encountered her, she'd cornered some poor child on the bus and was telling her she'd have her arrested because she was a police officer and she didn't like the way the kid was eating a bag of crisps or whatever. Real invective stuff. I stepped in and politely asked if the child knew this whack job, at which point she backed off. Anyway, I guess she saw me leave at my stop because I woke up the next morning to find my garden torn up. Total weirdo. Took my parents to court because he lost an our chairman election. Some people just have too much free time. He jumped in front of my car while I was driving down the road to yell at me for going through his trash at night. Told him it was probably raccoons. He refuses to believe it to this day. This is my favorite one. Instead of moving his trash or getting locking lids, he stalks your car at night to throw his body in front of it to protest your suspected raccoon-like activities. All the while, the trash pandas are in the background, having a freaking field day with his trash. How do we know you aren't a raccoon? A quick look at your name tells me you got it from the trash. How do you explain that HMMMMMM? He ain't one of ours, I can tell you that. That's exactly what you would say if he were one of your special operations guys. Which would explain why this raccoon is capable of driving a car. My sister's neighbor reported my sister to the police because her kids were playing in my sister's garden. Not for the usual reasons, too much noise etc. Nope, because a volcano in Italy had erupted and the radiation would hurt them. My sister lives in the UK. LMAO, I would have loved to see the police's face when they heard the reason. I would have loved to see the police's face. Likely the for frick's sake not another one of these look. This older lady lives across the street from me and she is obsessed with leaves falling on her lawn. To the point that she will come out of her house and pick up one individual leaf off the grass in the fall, or any other time. She spends hours a day outside with the leaf blower in full. She will go and knock on other neighbors' doors if she thinks you have too many leaves on your grass. She'll come over into your yard and do it herself if you're not home. What I think is weird is that she's in her 70s, no kids or grandkids living with her, and lives alone in a pretty large 4-bedroom house with an amazing in-ground pool in the backyard, with a slide and diving board and everything. Nobody has used that pool in at least 5 years, yet she opens it up every summer. Somehow she likes my family and has never once yelled at us about our leaves and randomly brings things over like half-eaten gallons of ice cream and asks if we want it, because she's not using it. Sounds like she's lonely bored. The old lady who lived below me left me multiple cryptic letters blaming me for the birds chirping too loudly in the mornings. Not pet birds. The sparrows and shoot outside. This went on 4 months. I used to work nights at a hotel and those were always my favorite calls to get. Yes, hello? The crickets outside are really loud and we can't sleep. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I'll just go have a word with them and see what we can do. This happened disturbingly often. I'm still not sure what they actually expected me to do about this at 1 AM. Yell louder than the crickets so they think twice about calling back. Hey I crickets. You all need to shut the frick up like right now. People are getting upset about the noise and calling to complain about it. Just bring in some cicadas and they'll cancel out the noise. And you are sure that you aren't a Disney princess? Had severe anger issues and yelled at anything or anyone he didn't like on the street. A few years ago he had a road rage incident and when he started banging on the other car's windows the occupants got out and beat him badly. During this he had a heart attack and now barely has enough mobility to walk to the mailbox and back. Also he doesn't yell anymore. If you are not ready for face punches you are not ready to punch faces. My neighbor was an 85-year-old widow that lived alone. She had 2 vehicles, a car and truck, and over the course of a few months I realized that she was no longer parking her car in her garage like she had for the many years prior to that. Then suddenly the truck wasn't being parked inside the garage either. Turns out she no longer had room in her garage to park her vehicles, because she was walking down to a residential construction site about a block away every evening and she'd grab 2 2x4s and bring them home. She had over 500 boards stacked in her garage and when she was questioned on what she was going to do with it, she didn't have an answer. Did you manage to get the money back off her for the water? And what happened with the dog shoot? I didn't try to get the water money back. I had a lot of guilt at the time because she was elderly and a widow. My solution at the time was to keep the exterior water shut off with a valve inside the house. When I confronted her about the dog crap, she said she'd send her son over to clean it up one of these days. She was capable enough of collecting it the first time, so I ended up doing it myself right away because of how atrocious it was. See, you're nice. I welder dumped that shoot on her front yard, possibly without the bag. I don't care if you're 85 and a widow, that still makes you an a-hole. Called the police on people parked perfectly legal in front of their house. Took pictures of my partner's dad just working in the yard, disappeared suddenly without a trace and then suddenly come back home in the dead of night 8 months later. Weirdos. That sounds a lot like jail. Quite possibly for stalking. Yep. Our neighbor would disappear for long periods of time. Cops showed up a lot. I could hear his wife complain that he'd get blackout drunk and his parole officer was unhelpful. His truck was eventually left in the complex lot with front end damage. He was in jail 3 times in 10 months. The last was obviously for a DUI. If you turn to alcohol to escape from your problems, alcohol just takes over as your main problem. I had a neighbor like that. He'd come over at random hours of the night, pounding on the door and demanding we move our cars, threatening to call the cops on us. So, we called the cops and reported some crazy guy screaming nonsense in our yard and trying to kick the door in. Never saw him again, and the new owners of the house were far more pleasant. Yeah, I once had a crazy neighbor who would come pound on our door, claimed to be a lawyer and insisted that us parking on the street in front of her house was illegal and she would call the cops on us. After calling her on her bluff several times, she finally gave up.